Welcome everybody to the Ask an Architect show. Glad to have Aimee Woodall with me today here locally in Washington, D.C. Really great resume of experience, excited to talk to you about it. Hopefully we'll provide some value to you all as students and those of you who are emerging professionals. We're going to try to learn about Aimee's perspective as an architect and her path to that place and her perspective going forward from here. So Aimee, if you could, for the folks out there, give us the 77-second bio of who you are and why you matter.
Sure. Why I matter. My name is Aimee Woodall. I am a licensed architect in Washington, actually in Maryland. Can we start over already?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Sure. Don't cut that out, Natalie. Leave that authentic.
I am a licensed architect in the state of Maryland, but practicing in Washington, D.C. I've been in D.C. now for 16 years, graduated from Texas A&M University, both undergraduate and graduate school. When I was doing my Master of Architecture, I also did a certificate in historic preservation. So it was really the historic preservation interest that drew me out of Texas and into the Washington, D.C. area. That, along with, I traveled quite a bit when I was in graduate school in Europe, and I really felt like DC just had a great culture, great European influence. Interesting. And I wanted to, step away from what was easy in Texas and try something new. So.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because that's actually exactly where I wanted to start. You mentioned going from Texas A&M to historic preservation at RTKL, right?
That's correct.
And I think when people think historic preservation, they don't always think about a larger, more established firm.
Right.
So what about historic preservation at RTKL attracted you, and how did that happen? Because again, that's kind of unusual.
It is unusual. In fact, when I started looking at firms in Washington, D.C., RTKL was not on my radar. It wasn't on my list because historically they weren't really known for being a historic preservation minded or sensitive architecture firm, although they're doing great design work. I had interviewed with several smaller firms that were kind of boutique historic preservation firms.
Sure.
I had a former classmate who was working at RTKL, and she was doing some historic preservation work. And she said, just come over and check us out. And I remember thinking, this will be a really good practice interview.
Yep.
And the people I met there were fantastic. The projects that they were working on were incredible. They were large-scale federal building modernizations with an element of historic preservation, but an even broader element of architecture. Me coming in not knowing anything, I thought, wouldn't it be great to learn how to be an architect as well as understand my, follow my passion for historic preservation.
One of the themes of the show is how people and relationships and the personal and the team environment all contribute to being a successful professional. And you mentioned the connection that got you into RTKL, and it wasn't even something that you had put on the map and you had planned for.
Right.
So as everyone out there is looking for their first job and thinking about where they want to work and who they want to work for, I always say the network is the best place to start, because you never know who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody and where the right place might be.
Right, and you never know, I think, what you think might be the right place may end up not being the right place, or what you think might not. In my case, what I did not think was going to be the right place. I knew the second I walked out of there that it was absolutely the right place for me.
And speaking of the right place, something must have been right, because you were there for over 10 plus years?
I was there for almost 16 years. I've recently resigned, but I was, yes, I spent the whole first part of my career with RTKL. RTKL is now rebranded as Callison RTKL from a recent merger, but I think most people know it as RTKL, and it's a very large firm. Over close to 2,000 employees worldwide, just in the architecture industry. We have a parent company that was a Dutch company with 20,000 employees worldwide. So has a kind of a widespread both in architecture and other disciplines.
Sure. So in a large company like that, I think sometimes students, when they're first coming out, a company like that is scary to them.
Sure.
They see that as a big corporate culture, and how do I find my place and how do I stand out? So something must have worked for you if you were there for 16 years. So how did you make that work for you?
I think part of what worked for me was that I did have a little bit of a specialization with the historic preservation specialty and interest. I was able to work on particular projects with similar-minded teammates. And because RTKL wasn't historically an historic preservation firm, there were only a few of us, so our team was actually very small. It felt like a small firm studio.
Yeah.
But in this bigger, bigger machine that is a large, large firm.
You keep hitting on some of the themes that we've already established, and that is team, and that we always talk about it's the right fit among the team, and then how do you perform within that team when you get there. So that's great to hear that that's kind of how you found that environment rewarding and how you found success. Let me ask you a little bit more about the historic preservation side. So our folks are out there right now, a lot of them are getting ready to graduate here in the coming year perhaps, and they're putting portfolios together. And tons of people are interested in historic preservation, but it's not something where you're doing new buildings or you're doing new design and new work per se. So if you're in school right now, how do you put together a portfolio that's attractive to a historic preservation firm? What can you do to actually show skills in that specific specialty?
I went through a certificate program, so I actually had some curriculum that was mandatory in order to obtain that certificate.
Within your school?
Within Texas A&M's program, there was a certificate program. So I did my MArch, but within the credits that I needed to receive my master's degree, some of them actually had to be focused.
So you showed an interest and a level of expertise already.
There were some classes that were mandatory to receive that certificate. Also, to receive the certificate, we had to focus our thesis on an historic preservation related project.
Sure.
To be truthful, my project that I presented for my thesis was a little bit of historic preservation and a lot of new construction, a lot of new design. So there was a lot of flexibility for us to show an interest, but also still be a little bit broader.
So you just weave it in and you take whatever opportunities you have, whether it's a certificate or a project or research potentially, to make that specialty work for you.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly.
You went back to Texas A&M, and I'd like to go back there a little bit too, because a lot of our folks are coming from potentially large state schools or more rural or college town schools, and then obviously hoping to go to bigger cities. So did you make the transition from College Station to DC? Was that a direct transition?
That was a direct transition.
So tell us about your perspective when you were going through that process.
Well, I didn't grow up in a small town in Texas. I actually grew up in the suburbs of North Dallas. So I was always somewhat exposed to a larger city. However, I think it was that traveling that I did during my graduate studies. I spent a semester in a small town in Tuscany. I spent a couple of summers in Paris and a little bit of time in southern France as well. And so I think that exposure to the culture and to the historic architecture, the cathedrals and the museums really inspired me to step away from Dallas. My whole family was in Dallas. It would have been really easy just to go back to Dallas.
Sure.
But I think I wanted something a little bit more. It wasn't easy. It was definitely risky. I didn't know anybody here, and I was scared.
I think that's what most people are probably going to be doing.
Yeah.
So it's good to hear that obviously it's been successful for you.
Absolutely.
You're pretty grounded here in DC. And you mentioned that you're kind of in a transition point here where you're looking towards the next 10 to 20 years of your career. And a lot of the people we have on the show are at that stage where they're starting to settle into their professional role as architects, and now they've gotten past the licensure, they've gotten past all that emerging professional stage. Now they're looking towards, okay, how do I really establish myself and be successful in this profession? So for you, Aimee, what do the next 10 to 20 years look like? What's your, what's your new focus and your new goal?
That's a good question, because I mentioned I did recently resign, and I will be taking starting a new position at the end of the summer, and it'll be a very different type of firm that I'm working with. Much more local firm, not small, they're still pretty large, but all of the work that they're doing is local, all of it is under construction, very, very design focused. So my focus will still be with historic preservation. They're doing a lot of really fantastic adaptive
and you want to
work.
build upon your specialty,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. It's really where my passion is.
Sure.
Part of taking off the summer and doing some self-reflection was to really make sure I was making a move to be in a position where I was excited about it.
Life change, right? After
and
16 years?
And was passionate about what I was going to be doing.
Yeah.
But my hope is that I'm working with some really talented people and doing some really incredible architecture. So
again, Aimee, you don't know this, but we consistently stress people in this show, and how important it is to be the right team member, to have the right attitude. It's not necessarily about aptitude, but about how you fit in. So I keep hearing that in your answers, and it's just refreshing because I think it reinforces that it's really about the people. It's who you're going to be working with and who you are as a team member.
Yeah.
So we just looked at your future. So as you're looking back at our folks who are potentially graduating here, what piece of advice would you give somebody who is about to graduate this coming year?
Absolutely. So Kimberly warned me about this question, and I thought about it quite a bit last night.
Thanks, Kim.
I actually have 3 answers. Do we have time for 3?
We have all the time in the world, Amy.
All right, great. So my first piece of advice is ask, ask, ask. Nobody is going to expect you to know everything when you're right out of school. But beyond that, if there is a committee that you want to get involved in, or a program in the office that you want to be part of, or even like a piece of innovation that you're interested in, don't wait for somebody to come to you and bring it to you.
So be proactive.
Be proactive. Ask, volunteer for that committee. Ask your employer how you can be involved in that program in the office, or if maybe there's time in your work week to research that innovation. Even if they have to say no, they're really going to appreciate the initiative.
Yep, absolutely.
Second thing is always be a professional, but don't take yourself too seriously. I think that the extra drama is just really counterproductive.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that's part of what we're trying to do with this show is to be serious and to take the profession seriously, but also have a little fun along the way.
Have a little fun with it. Don't get too wound up in the little things. I think I've let myself, in the past, it's funny to reflect,
Sure.
5 years back and think, gosh, that round of promotions really upset me. Or, this person did this and that person did that. It really upset me. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's just the extra drama again. I think it's just really counterproductive to personal growth and also your team members' growth.
Sure.
They're gonna feed off of that as well. And then the third piece of advice that I would, probably the most important one that I would give myself again, is don't be too afraid of taking some risks.
That's a great one too. The people who've succeeded the most out there are the people who've put themselves out there and have actually taken a risk. No risk, no reward, right?
Exactly.
All right, so Amy, let's round it out with the ultimate question. I ask everybody this, but I want to know, how do you define the Aimee Woodall brand? What is the definition of Aimee Woodall to you?
Oh, gosh.
Tell our people.
I didn't get warned of this one. I would think consummate professional. I would hope a little bit of leadership and just diligence. Doing the right thing. It won't always happen the first time, but making sure that you get to the right answer because it's the right answer, not because it's the easy answer or the answer that's going to make the most money, but doing the right thing.
Yep, doing the right thing is always the right thing. So, Amy, I want to thank you so much for being on the Ask an Architect sofa with us today.
Thank you.
I appreciate you taking the time out. And as always, we want to give love to Natalie Newman, our Director of Digital Media. Natalie, if you can come join us. I actually wanted you to ask the question of the day, if you could, for Amy. Do you have a question you can add to the show for Amy here?
Oh gosh, question of the day for Amy.
I'm putting Natalie on the spot here. We're trying to get Natalie more involved in the show. So we're doing ask question of the day with Natalie. Anything, Natalie? We can edit this out.
Perfect, great. Well, you're our first female that we've interviewed, so you've given general advice for architects in general and people in school, but what about for those females who are in architecture school and may feel, kind of like the odd woman out, or just feel like they're a little more unique because of their different perspective?
Absolutely. Well, I would say that the world is definitely changing. There have been many times when I sat in a meeting and been completely overwhelmed because not only was I the youngest person in the room, but I was also the only female in the room, and I was running the meeting, and that can be very scary, very overwhelming. And I think, unfortunately, there are still some people in our industry that might take advantage of that a little bit. But the last project that I was on was run by women. 100% of the team, with the exception of the superintendent on the site, the job site, was female. So that was really enlightening to me and really gratifying. So
Cool.
The world is changing.
Good question, Natalie. So thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time.